Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome back. It's Glow, and you know what we are doing today. We are doing a WWE video. We are doing our reacts. Let's get straight into it. Today, we are talking about the GOATs.
For over 30 years now, Monday Night Raw has
Shout out to my brother, Wrestling, or Wrestler with Andy.
been the flagship of
Video link in the description.
WWE programming, with it regularly being the place the biggest stars will congregate and carry out the next chapter of whatever ongoing storyline they're involved in. But who are the greatest superstars in Raw history? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at today. And where better to start than with Stone Cold Steve Austin? Yes, you could make a very solid argument that of all
Solid pick, solid pick.
the wrestlers who have ever appeared on Raw over the years, none are more closely associated with the show than the Rattlesnake is. After all, it was his antics which made Monday night's appointment viewing for fans back in the late 90s. Sure, Raw had been popular to some degree before that, but it wasn't until Austin got going that things really reached the next level, the mainstream level. How did he do this? Well, primarily through his feud with
Man, who wouldn't want to do that to their boss? Beat them up in the hospital.
Vince McMahon, a feud which went on for the better part of 2 years and gave us such classic moments as Stone Cold riding his Zamboni down to the ring, Stone Cold taking over WWF headquarters as its new CEO, and of course, Stone Cold giving the corporation a beer bath. And whenever he wasn't involved in memorable segments like these, the Rattlesnake was throwing in the odd match here and there on Monday nights, like the time he beat Kane
was
to
a
win the
good starter from
WWF
The
title
Rock.
in June of 1998. Really, to this day, it's a period which is probably still the highest high the company has ever reached. And a large part of the reason for that can be put down to the way
I love
Steve
his
Austin
vlog.
was able to make Raw his own personal playground for a while there. And even once the Attitude Era was over, he still continued to make it his show for the most part when, post-retirement, he became the on-screen sheriff in
Big
2003, with this period allowing him to remain there feuding
You
with
just
Eric
got
Bischoff for a
Stone
while,
Cold
even if he
Stunner,
was
boy.
no longer active in the ring. Then there's also the occasional one-off appearances he's made in the years since, each of which have drawn monster reactions from fans and only further solidified that, at the end of the day, Raw remains the Stone Cold Show. And it remains the Stone Cold Show because he did such a great job of giving the
This is
identity of being the place to
316 Austin.
be if you wanted to see good wrestling at the turn of the millennium. But Steve Austin wasn't the only person who was helping to give Monday nights this identity back in the
Bro,
late 90s and
I'm
early
gonna have an
2000s,
outrage
because there
if
was
they don't
another one
have
who was
somebody on here.
arguably doing so on the same level as even
Two
him at
people,
this point,
actually.
and that was The Rock. Now, we don't need to explain to you who The Rock is. After all,
Yeah,
he's one of the biggest
the
names not only in
part-timer.
wrestling, but also in
Yeah, the part-timer. The person that left wrestling after 5 years. That went to Hollywood just to get bigger.
Hollywood. He's a 10-time world champion, member of the board of TKO, and a star of hit franchises like The Fast and the Furious. But while his home has now largely become the
love
glitz and
Moana.
glamour of the
I
movie stage,
love that
before any
movie.
of that, it was Raw where he held court more often than not. Sure, you could argue he's more of a SmackDown guy, as that show is literally named after him, and saw some of his biggest moments take place. But years before the blue brand ever
You want to know why The Rock only uses his right elbow? I heard this in a video. I don't know if it's factual or not, but apparently he only uses his right elbow because he doesn't know how to do a left arm elbow drop.
existed, Dwayne
And
Johnson
that's
was turning
Austin.
himself into a phenomenon, and the place he was doing this was on Monday nights.
Insane.
Need any example? How about the time he acknowledged the Die Rocky Die chant and became the newest member of the Nation of Domination in 1997? And if that's not enough for you, then
Goes up to
how
my
about the
boy
period in
Andy,
2000 where,
Wrestle with
with Steve
Andy.
Austin out injured, he became the man to carry the company on his shoulders as its top babyface? Of course, those are just two moments out of many, and if we wanted to, we could be here all day listing off times The Rock made Raw essential viewing. After all, we've not even talked about his generational feud with Steve Austin yet, or his tag team with Mick Foley, the Rock and Sock Connection.
One thing is the Rock and Sock connection, man. is amazing. Amazing.
Hell, it was that latter pairing which gave us one of the highest rated moments in the show's
Just like
history
Team
when,
Hell
on the
No.
September 24th, 1999 episode, Mankind put on a This Is Your Life segment for the Great One. A segment which saw him be visited by names from the past, such as old high school girlfriends and football
That sounds
coaches.
like my head.
Even today, you'd be hard-pressed to find something which could draw in as many viewers as this one did. But it's not just the turn of the Millennium Era which makes The Rock
Bring
such
Matt
an all-time
Cardona
great Raw
to
superstar,
WWE.
as there's also his return to WWE in 2011 to have a 3-year-long program with someone we'll get to in a moment, a program which saw the company get some of the highest levels of interest it had in years. And
That's
no
basically all he
surprises for
said.
guessing then that
I
the
remember
majority of
watching
the
that
segments
promo as a
between
kid.
these two took place on Monday nights.
I
Who
watched
was
the
that
John
other
Cena
person in
win
this
so bad
feud?
because I was
Well,
a John
it
Cena
was none other
diehard
than our
fan.
next
I
subject,
was over
the
here
man
like,
who took up the mantle of the
"You can't
face of the
see
company
me."
after Austin and Rock left,
I never
John
give
Cena.
up, boy.
That's right, during the heights of the ruthless aggression and PG eras, there was no one on WWE TV more focused upon,
My boy
more
John
celebrated than
Sexy.
John Cena. And
That
because he
boy
was such a big
sexy.
deal then,
Look at
it should
that
come as no
buzz.
surprise that the majority of his run was
Wait,
spent on
hold on.
Raw.
That was so-
Yes, we know he did first come to prominence on SmackDown
that
during
guy.
the early 2000s. But if you ever needed any evidence that the Red Brand was the A show back then, you only need to look to the fact that once it became clear the
Sometimes
West
you just
Newbury
wanna
native was
suck
going to
John
be the
Cena's
star
throat.
player going forward, he was immediately moved over to Monday nights full time. And it was
As I
on
was
Monday
saying,
nights that we got to
sometimes
see
you
him
just
carry
wanna,
the
like,
flag for
watch
WWE
John
for
Cena
almost 2
just whoop
decades,
some
in the
booty.
process having memorable
Like
feuds
that.
against the likes of Edge, The Rock, and a few other people we'll come to soon enough.
That was a
In fact, you could argue that
Yeah,
since the
that's-
era of
that's
Stone
one
Cold, there
person
has
you
been no
better
one
put on
person
this
who's
list.
been
If
more
you
associated
don't,
with Raw
I'm
than
about
Big
to
Match
hit you
John.
with the most deadliest.
Yes,
sweet
even
chin
during the
music
darkest
in the
days of the
world.
company creatively,
Shawn Michaels is the GOAT of WWE. Him or Undertaker. No ands, if, or buts.
he was always there to keep some degree
But
of
my
fan
opinion-
interest with his kid-friendly antics and his winning ways. No,
Or
he
Randy.
might not have been the most popular with adults for the most part, but this wasn't an era of WWE for them. Rather, it was an era where the company were aiming for a much younger audience, something Cena worked perfectly for. Basically, he was their 2000s and 2010s Hulk Hogan-like superhero. And this was evident whenever he showed up to work on a Monday night and was forced to try and overcome insurmountable odds in
That
the
was
face
a
of rivals
good
like Umaga, The
banger
Nexus, and
match.
Brock Lesnar. Of course, like the hero he was, he always won the bout in the end and kept the fans who were watching happy, usually as the reigning and defending WWE champion. Were there low points to his run? Sure. But that doesn't take away from the fact that when all is said and done, John Cena deserves to be on a video about the greats of Raw, just as our next subject deserves the same thing. That's right, it's time to talk about Bret Hart. Yes, during the New Generation
Best-
era, a difficult...
Okay. Well, I would say best technical wrestler GOAT. He's not my best promo GOAT. He's my best in-ring GOAT.
time for WWF, both financially and creatively, they decided the best thing to do
Nobody
to
can
try and
top
give themselves a
Bret
shot in the arm was to add a new weekly
Like,
show to their
the-
lineup.
The second closest is probably Daniel Bryan.
One which would feature a different way of doing wrestling television, and this show turned out to be Monday Night Raw. But with Hulk Hogan effectively being gone by then, and with other big stars of the Golden Era also mostly being out of the door, it meant it was left to the next crop of upcoming names to establish what Raw was going to be. Luckily then, WWF had Bret Hart on the roster, and so he was able to turn Monday nights into a place where you
That's
could see
some
good
sick gear.
wrestling. And because of that, he has to be considered an all-time great of the show, as had it not been for him being there during its early days, who knows if it would have survived. But then, it's not just the early days of
That
Raw the
boy.
Hitman deserves credit for helping save, as
Brett.
flashing forward a few years to 1997, this was the year where the company very nearly went out of business. And it likely would have if it weren't for the product suddenly starting to catch fire. Of course, while you could credit part of this turnaround to Steve Austin, a large part of the credit also deserves to go to Bret too, as it was his heel but not really a heel character which helped to make Raw in 1997 arguably the best year of television WWE ever produced. Everything Bret did and said back then made sense in its own way,
It's just
and if
crazy.
you felt inclined, you could easily have cheered for him as he waged war on the hypocrisy
was
of both
good.
fans and the rest of the babyface roster. Truly, it was a joy to watch and gave us some classic moments such as him shoving Vince McMahon down on the March 17th, 1997 episode of the show and calling the whole situation BS. Basically, if you enjoy the character work that a Drew McIntyre or a Hangman Adam Page are putting out today, then you can thank the Hitman for this, as he laid down the template back during the Proto-Attitude Era Raw. That said, he wasn't the only person who was helping to make the show great during that era, as the same thing could be said for his career rival, Shawn Michaels. Yes.
Thank fucking God. Thank God. Thank you. Because if he didn't put Shawn Michaels on this list, we was about to have a problem. All he needs to do is put The Undertaker.
Whenever we talk about Bret Hart, the Heartbreak Kid has to come up eventually, as each are so closely intertwined. And that was never clearer than on 1997 Raw, as it was there their feud reached nuclear levels, the kind of levels which would make CM Punk and the Elite blush. Remember the infamous Sunny Days segment from HBK? That took place on Raw during this year, and it wasn't the only dig he fired at the Hitman then either. That said, Shawn Michaels' case for being one of the greats of Raw is down to a lot more than just one feud, as prior to this he was also helping to establish the show in its early days. And once a serious back injury forced him out of the ring for 4 years, he'd eventually return to make the show exciting all over again during the Ruthless Aggression era too. In fact, you could argue that it was this second run on the Red brand which fully solidified Shawn as not only a great of the show, but also a true great of the industry.
Second run was chef's kiss. Like, you didn't even need it, but whenever he came back and just took off in 2002, I can't even explain it. John Cena versus Shawn Michaels, Triple H versus Shawn Michaels, Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 25, WrestleMania 26, Shawn Michaels versus... You get the gist. It's just Shawn Michaels is Shawn Michaels versus Kurt Angle, Shawn Michaels versus Shelton Benjamin. I can just name off so many matches. You get the point.
Overall, as now, without his personal problems holding him down, he was finally able to reach his final form. And that final form was a man who could knock it out of the park each and every week, either by taking part in great matches such as the hour-long bout he had with John Cena on the April 23rd, 2007 episode of the show, or by involving himself in fun, child-friendly segments such as he did during the second run of D-Generation X. Honestly, while he might have been better known as Mr. WrestleMania, calling the San Antonio native Mr. Monday Night wouldn't be out of order either. No disrespect to Rob Van Dam, of course. After all, the amount of quality performances he's put in on Raw over the years is staggering, and just further evidence of why he deserves to be remembered as well as he is. But what about someone very close to him who has their own claim to being an all-time great of the Red brand? Surely it's time to talk about them for a while. Yes, we couldn't go the whole video without bringing up the subject of Triple H. Okay, we know what you're all thinking. Wasn't Triple H's Reign of Terror one of the lowest points for Raw in its 3-decade-plus long history? Well, sure, there were certainly low points, but that doesn't mean Paul Levesque hasn't helped to make Monday nights great over the years, too. After all, have we forgotten about WWE in 2000, the year where for many the company was at its absolute peak? That was the year of Triple H being probably the best wrestler in the world. And if you wanted to see him be the best in the world at this time, then the place to do so was on the Red brand, where he'd spent a large portion of his time holding the WWF title and feuding with the likes of The Rock and Kurt Angle. Then, of course, there's the post-Reign of Terror era, the period where, following the climax of the Evolution storyline, which saw the Game put over Batista strong in one of the best angles of the era, he went on to reform D-Generation X for a while, the same group he'd first dominated Raw with back during the Attitude Era. And as if that weren't enough, there were his later programs with John Cena, Randy Orton, and The Undertaker too. But even that isn't the end of the reasons we have for Triple H being in today's video, as once he semi-retired from the ring, he continued to serve a key role on Monday nights as the on-screen authority figure, a role he took on to reflect his real-life segue into a management position. Yes, never let it go forgotten that this was the run which gave us things like the Yes Movement and the debut of Sting. Hell, even the Reign of Terror itself had some great matches and moments during his feuds with the likes of Rob Van Dam, Booker T, and Goldberg. No, they didn't always end well, but there were some nuggets of gold hidden within them. And for that reason alone, they can't entirely be discounted.
I feel
In
like
fact,
if he
it was
put
one of these
Triple H
feuds
on
which
the
helped to
list,
establish
he
our
gotta
next
put
subject as a
Undertaker,
major
right?
player and future GOAT of Raw in his
Undertaker
own right.
gotta get some
Who are we talking
respect,
about
right?
here? Why,
Right?
Randy Orton, of course.
Okay.
Now,
Yes, I
when it comes to
love
Orton, it's easy
Randy.
to forget
I'm
about
glad
him in
he's
terms of
on it.
Raw's great, as he's been such a
Randy!
constant presence on WWE
Sexy
TV
boy.
for so long, performing at such a high level that
RKO.
it is almost taken for granted. But when we're looking at the best to ever do it on the flagship, we
Randy's
can't
just
not
the
include
coolest,
him,
man.
as he's given us so many great moments
Randy
there
is
over the years.
coolest.
Yes, it was on Monday nights that the Viper first showed he was a future star in waiting as a member of Evolution. And it was on that same show that he became the youngest world champion in WWE history. Then, as if this weren't enough, it was also there that he
Randy.
created his Legend Killer gimmick. A gimmick which eventually saw him come perilously close to ending The Undertaker's streak at WrestleMania 21.
Amazing match with no rehearsal. How do you do it? You're both phenomenal.
Still not convinced of Randy's Red Brand greatness? Well, how about the fact he was also able to dominate the tag team division there for a while as one half of Rated RKO alongside Edge. And after that was over, he segued right back into the main event scene with his fantastic heel character during the Age of Orton storyline. And that only takes us up to the 2000s. That's right, we still have almost 2 full decades of the Viper on Raw following this, with the
Yes,
legendary moments he
sir.
created during that time being countless. The Authority, Arcade Bro, the numerous other WWE title runs. There's nothing Orton hasn't done on Monday nights at this point. And with it not looking like he's going to be stopping anytime soon, who knows what else he'll achieve before all is said and done. Maybe at the end of the day,
Man, Randy be getting everybody with his back selling. I feel like Randy's fine, or he wouldn't have returned. You gotta think about that. But because he returned, Randy gotta be okay a little bit. So he's just selling that back so fucking good. Like, god dang, Randy. I love you.
when everything is gathered and collected,
I
he'll be
love
remembered
Randy.
as the undisputed greatest of all time when it comes to Raw. That said, if he wants to reach this level, then he's
Give
going to
him
have some
his
competition
flowers.
from our next subject, someone who just recently returned to WWE looking to reestablish their own legacy. Who are we talking about this time? Who else but CM Punk? That's right, ever since he sat
Really?
down cross-legged on the entrance ramp on the June 27th, 2011
can't.
episode of The Red Brand and cut his now
Nuts.
iconic pipe bomb promo, CM Punk has
He's
been
good
one of the
on the
most talked
mic.
about figures in all of
It's
wrestling.
just not my
And
style.
so much of the stuff he'd done in the years since
I
has also
like
happened on Raw
Punky,
too.
but just-
Winning the WWE title,
Can't
then
say
walking
he's the
out of the
greatest of
company in
all
what was
time
dubbed the
or not,
second
but-
summer of Punk? Check. Yes, that happened while he was a member of the Raw
He was
roster,
just a good
as
main
did his
eventer
later
in my book.
434-day
And
run
that's
with
gonna
that
be a
same belt.
controversial take.
Of course, this run created many memorable moments within it as well, then, as it saw the voice of the voiceless feud with figures such as Daniel Bryan, Chris Jericho, and The Rock. And even when this run came to
I
an end,
love this
Punk
run,
continued
though.
to hold down the fort on Monday nights for a couple more years. There, getting into arguably equally as important programs against the likes of Brock Lesnar and The Shield. Sure, it would all come crashing down when he quit the company for real in 2014, and from there, spent the next 7 years being a ghost as far as the industry was concerned.
He got his booty whooped in UFC. What the fuck you mean, brother?
But following his run in AEW, hell has since frozen over, and he's now returned to WWE, and more specifically, to Raw. How will this run go, and what impact will it have on his overall status as an all-time great of the Red Brand? We guess we'll just have to see how things go when he returns from injury and gets into a long-awaited feud with our next subject.
I want to see Seth.
No, we're not talking about Drew McIntyre. Rather, we're talking about Seth Rollins. Yes, of all the members of The Shield who took over WWE TV
Okay.
during the mid-2010s,
Okay.
arguably none have made their stamp on Monday nights in quite
Is
the
this
same
just
way as
goats
the
and
Architect
Raw?
has. And that's because, well, all three, namely he, Roman Reigns, and Jon Moxley, have spent their fair share of time on both major WWE shows. In recent years, Reigns has become more of a SmackDown guy, all while Mox has found a new home over in AEW.
Okay.
So this has meant Raw was able to morph from being the
Okay.
show run by people
This
like
guy's
Triple H
getting
and John
past
Cena
it.
into Monday Night Rollins instead. The 3-hour block where every week the Iowa native proves why he's still one of the best in the world. How has he done that exactly? Well, by having great matches on an almost weekly basis. That and by having multiple reigns as world champion. That's right, whether it be the WWE title, Universal title, or the new World
big
Heavyweight title,
Raw
there's been no
moments,
one more
too.
dependable on the red brand than Seth Rollins when it comes to holding down fort with
You
the top
trying to tell me
prize.
Undertaker
And that's
ain't on
exactly
here?
why he's been put in this position so often. Hell, as it stands today, he's currently the
I
only
know
person
you
to have ever
think-
held the
when you
aforementioned
think
revived
Undertaker,
World Heavyweight
think
title.
SmackDown.
And during his run with this,
But
he's given us
Ring
some very
period,
memorable moments and matches against opponents such as Finn Balor,
Undertaker is
AJ
Hall of
Styles,
Fame.
and Shinsuke
Go
Nakamura.
on
Basically, the
Raw,
early 2010s roster of New Japan Pro
NXT.
Wrestling. Of course, it's not just his
On
time as world
every
champion that's made
show,
his runs on
it's
Raw
the
so special, though,
Undertaker.
as he's also at points helped to elevate mid-card straps such as the Intercontinental title. And when he hasn't been doing that, he's been doing other things like teaming up with his wife Becky Lynch to
Undertaker,
take
man.
part in mixed tag team feuds, or creating new characters such as the Drip God or the Monday Night Messiah. And let's take care to not understate just how big of a deal the Shield were in helping to make Raw feel exciting again
I'm
from late
salty.
2012 onwards. As were it not for them showing up every week and destroying anyone they felt deserved their wrath, the show might have been entirely unwatchable. All this is to say then that when the book is finally written on Raw, Seth Rollins will be right there amongst the other great performers of the brand. In fact, he might even be right next to our next subject, none other than Chris Jericho. Why is Chris Jericho on our list of all-time greats when it comes to the red brand?
This is our
Well,
pick.
because like with everyone else we've looked at today, he's done so many great things there. Hell,
Because
his
if
very
it
first
was
night in
only
WWE happened on the August
I was looking at it because if it was only Seth Rollins, I was about to skip that bitch because I was salty. I'm still salty, but I'm good with this pick because it's the Rockarola of the Millennium, brother.
August 9th, 1999 episode of the show, and that would end up going down in history as one of the best debuts of all time. Then, of course, there's his numerous other Monday Night highlights over the years. Highlights such as him becoming the first ever undisputed champion in 2001 while a member of its roster, having a great Phantom title win over Triple H on the April 17th, 2000 edition, and taking part in an excellent first feud with Shawn Michaels around the time of WrestleMania 19. But that still wouldn't be all, because after this, once the brand extension formally became a thing, he'd spend most of his time on the flagship, having amongst other things, a memorable program with Christian, the honor of getting the on-screen credit for creating the then Raw exclusive Elimination Chamber, and an all-time classic pitting him and Chris Benoit against Stone Cold Steve Austin
That
and
was a
Triple H for the
banging
tag team titles on the May 21st, 2001 edition of the show. You know, the
I
one where
hate
the
what he
game
did,
tore his quad. Sure, after
had
that, he'd
bangers.
take some time away from wrestling, but once he returned again in 2007, he'd
He
pick
just
right
looked like
back
a
up where
daddy
he left
and
off
sexy.
by having a career highlight feud with Shawn Michaels. And when that was done, there were further excellent programs against performers as wide and varied as CM Punk, AJ Styles, and Kevin Owens. Hell, it was that latter program which gave us one of the best segments in Raw history, the Festival of Friendship, a true diamond in the rough that
You
was
just made the
2014 WWE. No, the way things stand right now, it doesn't look like he's going to be returning to the red brand anytime soon. But even if he never sets foot in a Raw ring again, the Demo God's place as one of the best to ever appear there is secure anyway. Just as everyone else we've discussed today can also...
Alright, y'all go check out my boy, Wrestling with Andy. So the final thoughts. I think that was a good ass video. I'm not even gonna hold it to you. But also, Undertaker's not on the list. Like, I know he's a SmackDown guy, usually. But he was on Raw. A lot. A lot in the Attitude Era. I think you have to put Undertaker, man. Undertaker. As always, I'll see y'all. And y'all keep it gravy, baby.
You say you see the same bitches everywhere that you go. You got me going in circles every time that you show. And